BookTube. I'm here to talk about my favorite books of 2023. Before I dive into the list, I wanted to make a request from you because I have decided in the month of February to do like a February favorites because why not start off the year with lots of great books? And so I'm going to be selecting books from BookTubers, but I also wanted to put the question out there for any commenters who don't make videos, if you wouldn't mind leaving a comment on some of your favorite books that you've read in the last year. They don't have to be like 2023 releases. It can be anything and any genre, any length, what have you, because I like reading all sorts of books, and yeah, I would be happy to read some of your favorites or just hear what some of your favorites are, and see if you have read them or heard of them or what have you. So yeah, I'm going to be focusing the majority of my February books on everyone's favorites, and I will when I read the book, I will describe where I got that recommendation from, because I want to read a variety of things. Anyway, so that's that little mini announcement. Now I'm going to go into my favorites list. I selected 10 books, and I went through I spent like 30 minutes doing this because I don't want to do a whole spiel on the number of books I read, but I read the most books I've ever read in my life in 1 year. I don't know, it still boggles my mind because I had a month and a half off, pretty much, because I had a month off in the summer when I was going on a camping trip and a / road trip where I read 2 or 3 books, maybe a little bit more, but not much more. And then I just had a 2-week vacation during the Christmas break, so where I read 1 or 2 books there. So it's just crazy how many books I've read last year. So yeah, I'll talk about my goals in this next video. But anyway, it took me a while to scroll through everything. I really need to do a better job of jotting down my favorites as I go. That way I have a list to pull from. But anyway, so I did a selection of some nonfiction books because those tend to be every single year when I do a favorites video or when I'm looking back on the year. They just tend to stand out more than some of the other books. So I did a list of, I think, 5 nonfiction books, perhaps. And then I did some favorites of poetry and romance and essays and whatnot. So yeah, I'm just going to dive into the nonfiction first. So the first one is a book, I should have wrote down the dates of when I read these, but this was towards the beginning of the year. I want to say it was February or March. I read Pig Years by Ellen Gatos. And I really liked her writing style. Her subject was a little bit hard-hitting in a way because she is a farmer for not the big agricultural companies, but small town Vermont, small owned farming. And she goes through her years of working in a variety of different farms. But she herself also has pigs, as the title would kind of clue you in on. And she loves her pigs, and she talks about their personalities and what they're doing day to day. It focuses more on the farming part of it, but pigs do play a significant role in this. With farming and with the pigs, you can kind of guess how the pigs' lives end, and that was the hardest part for me reading this book. But the story itself and the writing and just that giving me that window in a way into that world of how are these different farmers surviving and living, and how is a farmer digging in the soil, what is that life like, and a lot of the places that she works for are doing the farmers market, the local farmers markets. And I don't know if I mentioned this takes place in Vermont, so she goes to Vermont sometimes, she goes down to New York and New York City to be part of the farmers markets there. And it also amazed me how much food goes to waste, like pounds and pounds, hundreds of pounds, it seems of vegetables that are never purchased, or there's a little ding on one of them. So yeah, I don't know, all that just sounded really interesting to me. And also considering nowadays the prices of things and how astronomical everything is, including vegetables. But that's a whole other story there. But yeah, again, first book in my nonfiction pick. Let's see here. This next one is What It Takes, The Way to the White House by Richard Ben Cramer. I don't read a ton of political books, and if I do, it's more of a history or biography where, politics are put in there. But this was very memorable. It follows the 1988 run-up to the presidential election, And Biden, the president or now, was in this featured in this book. Bob Dole, George Bush, and a couple of different names that I can't remember off the top of my head. I didn't take any notes before making this video, but other names I wouldn't have recognized, but I'm sure were prevalent during this time. And the writing, again, I think the writing of all these books are great, so I'm not going to go into much of the writing, but just the description of the characters, you really, and I say characters even though it's a nonfiction book, because the author fully fleshes them out. Like, you can feel like you're sitting having a coffee with these different possible presidents, and their demeanor, their expressions, you feel like you can watch their hands move as they're talking, kind of thing, and it flashes back and forth through time, and you're following all these different people as they're going through the election, and like, what is the polls like at the time, and how does the person who wins, and I think it's like something I wanted to bring to people's attention, because and this is not why I picked the book, but I think it's relevant now with the election coming up this year. If you're interested in elections or all that, or politics at all, then this would be a great book to pick up, however you fall on the spectrum of politics. And let me see, is there any other books here for nonfiction? No. Okay, so then my other three, or two, let's see, because the other one I have is nonfiction. I'll go ahead and show it now. This is all out of order, but the other one, because I wanted to give like a variety of books, How to Be a Moonflower, a Field Guide by Katie Daisy, and I selected this book because it was my favorite graphic novel or like illustrated book, because I think this falls in between the two. It's a really beautiful cover here, and I thought this was an interesting take on a field guide, because it's a mixture of writing and illustrations. But the field guide is all about the night and what creatures are about, and what different flowers bloom, what the moon is doing, the stars, and all of that. And so it wasn't like the typical field guide that I've read that during the day, or I've read different field guides of like the different birds that are in your backyard, or a different specific region, or your broad spectrum. But this one, I thought, I really liked the take on it, and then the illustrations were just absolutely gorgeous. And she also, when I looked up this author, she also has one for the daytime as well. And she mentions different parks that are, I can't remember exactly what they were called, but basically designated like blackout areas where you can see the stars, even like places that are near cities. There's a couple of them around the United States that will be really fun to visit. Like, you don't have to go all the way out to the desert or all the way out in the country necessarily always to view this. And so I thought that, or you could do this like in your own backyard kind of thing, because let me see, so there we go for that one. And then now going back to the physical books that are nonfiction, I had to include Gladys Taber. If you've watched any of my videos recently, I've read Gladys Taber before, but I've really enjoyed her writing this year. And this is Country Chronicle, and here's the author on the back with her cat Amber, and this really, it's all focused on like the small town day-to-day life. She lives in Connecticut, and she calls her place Still Meadow. She's famous for I think these Still Meadow books, and My Own Cape Cod, her summer house there. And it's just the quiet, just enjoying those quiet moments, cooking your own food and just enjoying each season as they come, and not rushing through things. So really like this author. And I'm slowly collecting more of her books every time I go to a bookstore now. I'm like going to see if she has any new ones, because she wrote so many books. This next one is Bayou Backwaters by Alan W. Eckhart. This is kind of funny that it's on this list, because when I got this book, I purchased it at a library sale, and what drew me in was this gorgeous cover. And I was like, I kept saying, even if the writing is bad, I will like the book, at least for the pictures, because it's also there's tons and tons of illustrations as you go through it. And so, but the writing was really good as well. And then when I looked at the author, he's a ton of writing. He's like famous for his writing as well. And so this was just all around like the perfect nature book set in Louisiana. I am really like captured by that region. I've never visited before, but I read a whole history of New Orleans this year, but this one took the cake because of just, yeah, it was like the perfect nature book to read. And it follows many different animals, and it really reminded me of Sally Carriger, which is another one of my favorite nature writers. And she is most famous for One Day on Beetle Rock. But when I say it reminds me of her, is because you kind of like get into the mindset of each animal and how they're all, you know, it's like basically like, you know, the circle of life, like different animals will, you know, eat or injure this other one, and you know, how they're all part of the big picture. So yeah, there's that one. And let's see here. This next one is The Complete Cartoons of the New Yorker, another library sale find. I've read a couple of New Yorkers here and there, you know, throughout the years as you come across them, but this was just so good. It follows, let me see here. It also includes 2 CDs, and I have not figured out how in the world to access them. But it goes from 1925 to 2004, and so what made this make the cut of my list was seeing the transformation through the decades, and it also includes there's descriptions of different authors' history with the New Yorker, and yeah, so it has different authors, but also like it talks about the time period, like what different comics were being included in this, like different, you know, when the railroads were happening, when the cars, you know, were coming out, the TVs, you know, you could see the modern age coming closer with the different developments and whatnot. So yeah, this was kind of like a history book of the 1900s and comics, and with lots of fun and humor, and also some sad moments, and some things that I didn't catch at first, like different things that, you know, like aren't relevant, not exactly relevant nowadays, but you know, aren't utilized, and so it was just a great learning experience as well. Okay, my favorite book of essays was Essays of E.B. White. Before reading this book, my only exposure to him was through like what you would think typically, like Charlotte's Web and Stuart Little, but he wrote so many essays, and I want to find more of his work after reading this. This follows there's different categories: his time in New York, his time on his farm, different essays on writing and literature, his modern day. This came out, let me see, in 1977. Oh wait, hold on. No, it was originally published in 1934. But I think when it says 1934, I think it's like the first essay in this collection was printed in 1934, I believe. But anyway, early, you know, it's not anything recent. It's just like the planet and Florida and his different memories of his childhood. So after reading this, I dove into reading a biography of him, and yeah, I just want to read more of his work because I like how his mind thinks, kind of deal. But yeah, this was a great essay collection. And then the last physical book I have to share with you is my favorite children's book of this year, which was Lumber Camp Library by Natalie Kinsey Warnock. And this is about a girl who she's 8, I want to say. Yeah, 8 years old, and she is up in like the northernmost part of Vermont. And it's called like the Northwest Kingdom, I think is what it's called. I never heard of that before. Like I'm not from New England. I've never visited there, unfortunately. I do want to one day, but that's all beside the point. This is following what is her name? Ruby, and she lives with her family, and her father is a lumberjack and is going off and, you know, risking his life for different things. And she really likes the community that she's in, with just, you know, it's all like a family oriented story. But things go awry where now she's kind of like pushed into, now you have to really mingle with the town, and how is her like home life conflicting with the town life, and when her family needs help, now they're also having to befriend the town, whereas before they were very much isolated. But, you know, they were loving their life, you know, in a sense, you know, they're loving, like, interacting with their family, but now getting pushed into other circumstances. And like the setting and the writing, it was very homey and cozy in a way, even though it had traumatic things in it, and it was just like a really nice, warming book. Let me see here. And then I have 2 more to show you. my favorite romance and my favorite book of poetry. So the romance book is Lightning Strikes Twice by Elizabeth Hrib. And the cover and being about nature is what drew me into this book. This is the author's, I think, debut category romance, I want to say. And it's following a woman who is a veterinarian and is coming back to her town. And the guy, I can't remember their names, but the guy is helping out on the ranch and doesn't know any idea, has no clue what he's doing. But he takes her out to different weather events like lightning, for example, and different things, and like their romance develops over time, even though they have like a very like antagonist relationship at first, because she wants, she all of her life, she was living on this ranch, she knows how it should be run, but how the horses should be treated and whatnot, but she's been away for a while, so her father needs help, and so he brings the male lead in, even though he has no idea what he's doing, but he's very nice and generous with his time, even though he has no experience with it. And I really liked the atmosphere of it, and like their contention and whatnot. It wasn't too heavy-handed with the confrontations and the antagonism there, and also it wasn't too heavy on like any explicit content at all, which I really appreciated. But yeah, I really want to read more of this author's work for sure. I think she has one coming out this year. But and then at the bottom it says, warning, stormy weather ahead. So yeah, you have like the stormy weather, and you have like the stormy relationship, and so yeah, the cover, I think the cover design really earns its keep. Okay, this last one is my favorite book of poetry, which was Mary Oliver Devotions, the selected poems of Mary Oliver, and this is a compilation of all of her writings for all of the books she's ever published. And it was interesting. It went from present day, her most recent published book, going backwards in time. So you see her, mentioning, being elderly and the problems that come along with it. And as you go along, she's talking about, the aches and pains of aging. And then it goes like, when she's really young. That's not like necessarily the primary focus of this collection, because there's, pulling like the best works of each of her books. But Mary Oliver, I feel like, can do no wrong in my eyes with poetry. If you're someone who has never read poetry before or is like scared off by it, because I can be as well. As I mentioned, I feel like every time I mention a book of poetry, I'm constantly mentioning how I'm always trying to read more poetry, because I can find it not discouraging. That's not the right word, but can be like overly complex for me to decipher, what's the meaning of this line and whatnot. But Mary Oliver doesn't write it where it goes over your head. You can't understand what she's saying, and she talks about nature, talks about animals, talks about her life and whatnot. And so yeah, this is a great collection, and a great start, I feel like, if you want to dive into her poetry, because you can get like the best selections of all of them. So yeah, this is for sure is a book I'm going to be rereading. I'm going to be rereading all of these books. So those are all of my favorites from 2023. I had a really hard time selecting them. I could go on and on and on with my books. I could probably give you a list of like top 50, and that doesn't even include, or even I can't even like think about like my top 10 favorite books of my lifetime. Like all like the favorites, honestly, it's hard for me to select, because I really enjoyed reading, and I'm not too like nitpicky with reading all the time. But I mean, I can't easily DNF a book, but if I read a book, I'm at least gonna enjoy it to some extent. But anyway, I will talk to you in a little bit. Thanks, BookTube.